Well, good afternoon, or I should say good morning, and thank you for joining Informer Live Presents on WIN TV. God, so much is going on. Within a matter of 7 days, former President Donald Trump, who was seeking the Republican nomination for president against Joe Biden, barely escaped an assassination while on the campaign trail. The injury to his ear did not prevent him from attending the 4-day Republican National Convention, where he received the nomination along with his vice presidential running mate, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance. Then, Saturday, President Joseph Biden, following a disturbing and disappointing debate performance against Donald Trump, which resulted in waves of concerns about his fitness to run for office and calls for him to abandon his race for the presidency, made the historic and anticipated choice to drop out of the race for the presidency. But Biden didn't give the nation time to ponder or debate over who would be his replacement. In his same public statement, he announced and endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris to become the next president of the United States of America. Biden wrote, "Today, I want to offer my full support and endorsement for Kamala to be the nominee of our party this year. Democrats, it's time to come together and beat Trump." And in just 2 days, Kamala Harris's campaign said it has raised more than $100 million, with more than $2 million raised by Black women within 24 hours. Well, many are proud to say that it's been Black women who got this train out of the station when they strongly encouraged Joe Biden to select a Black woman as his running mate in 2020. Today, we're speaking to just 3 of those thousands of Black women who've been running that train that has not only benefited Kamala Harris, but hundreds of women and men seeking political office across the United States. I am excited to have with us today Melanie Campbell, President and CEO of the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation and convener of the Black Women's Roundtable. We also have Gwen McKinney, who is the president and founder of McKinney and Associates Public Relations, as well as Unerased, a website that focuses on Black women, their issues, politics, health, many issues, Black Women Unerased, and in addition, Mary Pat Hector, who is a graduate of Spelman College and Georgia State University. Mary is the CEO of RISE, an organization that trains and hires students to organize campaigns focused on eliminating tuition and fees, expanding financial aid, and ending student hunger and homelessness, and most importantly, getting out the vote. I'm so excited to have these 3 women on the call with us today. So let's bring them on. Welcome, Gwen McKinney. How are you?
Happy
Mary
to
Pat
be
and
here.
Melanie.
Hello, ladies.
I don't know if you all have had a chance to exhale because you all have been. I mean, we're getting ready to have the Olympics in Paris, but I think this Olympics started months ago, years ago, with you all actually being the force behind what we have seen come into fruition today. I want you all to just talk a little bit about what you're feeling right now, and then we're going to get into some details about the Harris campaign. And Melanie, I'm going to start with you.
How do I feel? I'm thrilled. I feel a sense of joy and in some ways a sense of relief. And what I mean by that is the tensions were so high over these last few weeks as we, organized to fight to keep the Biden-Harris ticket together and to make sure that we were clear that if for some reason President Biden decided to do what he did on Sunday, and that's to step aside and pass the baton to really a new generation of political leadership with someone who was right there, who's been right with him for 3.5 years. So that was like my initial response. And also understanding the history of politics in this country, that we weren't having a regular election now. And what I mean by that is that we were having a movement moment, and that's why you had almost 10,000 women sign the letter that we had done, and was about to continue to push forward with that. And then the announcement came, and then we got on the Black Women Call, 40,000 women, $1.5 million raised in 2 hours. They then went up to at least 2 million. The next night, last night, Black men got on a call. With I think 50,000 or something like that men on the call, and raised over $1 million. So in a matter of 48 hours, and we hadn't seen that level of enthusiasm since the first time President Obama ran. So that's what I mean by a political movement is taking place in this country.
Well, Gwen, how about you?
Well, I want to say hi to my sisters, my friend and partner Melanie, and Mary Pat Hector, who is just really, it's wonderful that we have someone to hand the baton to. So I want to just give some big love to you both, and also to you, Denise, for keeping that drum roll. How do I feel? And we can talk about it a little bit more, but I am heavily just, I don't want to say burdened. I'm heavily weighted in a good way with the march of history. You all probably know, or maybe not, 60 years ago, August 19th, 1964, Fannie Lou Hamer led a delegation, the Mississippi Freedom Party, to the Democratic Convention, which was held in Atlantic City, New Jersey. She was demanding that delegation, which was led by a Black woman and made up of farmers and sharecroppers and people who earned their sweat and labor through the work of the land in the Deep South. She came to demand a seat for the Mississippi Freedom Party. They were denied. And not only were they denied the seat, but our dear President Lyndon Johnson at the time staged an event to distract the audience from Fannie Lou's impassioned plea. Now, one of the things that I can say, Fannie Lou Hamer, they didn't seat her, but no one muzzled her. Her voice, her...
Looks like we lost Gwen. I'm not sure if everybody else is still here, but we until we bring her back. There you are. Okay, Gwen, we lost you for a second.
Where did I drop off? At Fannie
Well,
Lou?
you just said that.
I am so sorry. My
okay.
beach house Wi-Fi is a little weak.
Well, it's nice that we could be there. I wish we were all there together. We could be doing the show from there. But yeah, you were talking about
Fannie Lou.
the president. Yeah, but the president who, she was able to give her impassioned remarks. But what happens after that? So let's move on. But I just want to know, from your perspective, where you are right now.
The march of history.
But positively burdened by
the march of history.
The march
of history. The fact that 60 years, look where we are. We can't measure progress when we're living through it. But amazingly, a Black woman is at the top of the Democratic Party ticket. That is just amazing.
Well, what I want to do, and you see, if you look over one of my shoulders, I'm not sure which one it is. You can see who's back there, right? Fannie Lou Hamer. So we're bringing her. We both got her in our minds and in our hearts. But Mary Pat, when we talk about the march to this moment, and a lot of this, has, interestingly, not only is it an issue of gender, but it's also an issue of age, right? And so I'm going to say that as a young person, the work that the women have been doing Gwen says 60 years, we can probably go back further than that, is to make sure that young people like yourself, see a future in politics and in a lot of different areas. What are you feeling at this moment?
I will tell you the past few weeks have been a roller coaster for me emotionally and beyond that of the staff that I have and lead. Um, it seemed as if every single day something new was popping up, but I think, despite how shocked people were about the president, deciding that he wasn't going to run for reelection, they were even more enthusiastic about his endorsement of Vice President Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee. Prior to, I will say that I was a little nervous, actually, prior to the president's announcement, simply because, the polls were showing that, Black men or young Black people were not enthusiastic about either candidate. On the ground, our ground game was really centered on focusing on the issues that young people cared about, as well as some of those state-based races, mobilizing young people from the bottom of the ballot to the top. But the enthusiasm and the support amongst young people and Gen Zers around potential, president, around the potential of Vice President Kamala Harris being the first woman president, the first Black woman president in the country. It has been settling for me. And it has also not only energized me, but energized the hundreds of young people that we employ, but also the thousands of young people that our students come into contact with every single day.
Wonderful. Now, as you all know, and Melanie, you've been on the ground for a long time, knowing what this process is all about, because we know that we can't, she still has to get the delegates in place. We still have to go through a convention, which will take place on the 19th through the 2nd of August. She still has to get the nomination. She still has to get the money. She still has to face, so the attacks that are going to come from the other side. How are we planning to stay ramped up and engaged and to help in this fight for that seat? What's happening? I know you had 44,000 Black women on a call the other night. What are folks saying?
Well, she was the other part of that ticket. And to President Biden's credit and their agreement with each other, that money is now her war chest. The campaign is she's not being handed something that she has to start as if it was a year from now. So she does have that as a being the part of the ticket. The Biden-Harris campaign is now the Harris campaign until she gets her VP, right? So she has the infrastructure is in place. What she also has is a level, as my sister Mary Pat Hector said, right? Enthusiasm. Mary Pat, we were together. What was that? About a month ago, we were together. I was in Macon, Georgia, with Mary Pat, Helen Butler, and about 150 Black women from across the state of Georgia the day after that debate. And so we know that there was a lot of anxiety. The meeting wasn't about a partisan conversation, but the conversations had to be had, talk about what happened, right?
Yes.
And so I know that anxiety, but also know that there was a level of determination that we didn't want to see our vote voided by a few people. And that played out over the weeks. And I honestly been on the road almost since I saw you, Mary Pat, and which is exhausting. That's the work. But I've been in Georgia. I've been in Vegas. I'm in Florida. About to head back to Louisiana. And what you were hearing on the ground was a determination that we weren't going to have our votes voted. And as Black women, we knew we also have the collective power to flex that power to the powers that be. That if you think that you're going to push Biden and Harris off of this ticket, one, it's a losing proposition, and history proves that if you are a divided house, you will fall. But in number two was if he steps aside, it better be a Black woman, right? And you see that now because she's getting the delegates, she's getting the commitments. Nancy Pelosi came out, all of these folks are coming out. Now it's not all over, but she has the wind against her back going into that convention. And we have 104 days, and the enthusiasm we see now is not going to dissipate. It is only going to increase. The Win with Black Women call that we were all on with Joe Taker and Holly and all of us on that call the other night, folks volunteered to work on the campaign, right? So you had over 5,000 people sign up. Not just you raised $1.3 million in less than 3 hours, but you had 5,000 people to sign up to volunteer on the campaign. With what I remember most about 2008 was that you had people who were doing stuff, whether they were on the campaign or not. That's what we're about to see in these next 100 days.
Right. I have to say I crashed the call of the Black men last night.
Me too.
And I know. So,
but they were on our call.
Denise.
They were on the women's call.
Denise, can I say this? And
yes.
This is really a statement. And I keep going back to history because history proves what our future is going to look like. Black women from day one have led the struggle for freedom and democracy in this country from day one, and have often been pushed aside. We're pushed aside with the 15th Amendment. We're pushed aside with the 19th Amendment when white women got the right to vote. We continue to push. We continue to demand. We believe in democracy, and we inspire others. I understand, Melanie, there's a Win with White Women group. I didn't know. I'm not sure I feel some kind of way about that.
Yeah, they're trying to do something. I heard something like that. I was like, well, don't call it that. That's not a good idea, but we get your point.
I feel some kind of way about that. But the point I'm making is that across the board, through the histories and through the generations and through the ages, the Melanie Campbells of this world have continued to persevere, to push, to fight, and to really tell our story. And so I just want to say that I want to give a great big sloppy kiss to Black women who have made this thing happen.
So let me ask this question, because the one of the critics that the media has been focusing on today, and I don't remember the member of Congress's or the senator's name, who said that who claimed that Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, was a DEI pick, and that in essence using that as an insult, where I don't. Anybody that does DEI finds it as a winning case, right? We've got to recognize diversity, equity, and inclusion. But what do you all think about that?
For the past few days, and this is on my C4 hat, RISE has both a C3 and a C4 entity. But speaking in our C4 capacity, that has been something that, I had been up against in trying to do a quick turnaround of an endorsement of the vice president as the Democratic nominee. I think a lot of people were like, well, wait, maybe we need to wait to see if there are any other people that are more qualified to throw their hat in the race, or maybe we need to see what some of the other candidates are, what some of the other candidates are doing. And I thought to myself, why are we thinking that she's not qualified enough to have our endorsement? Who better than her to receive our endorsement with with less than 170 days away from the election? And I think what we're also seeing beyond the enthusiasm amongst Black women, amongst young voters, amongst voters at the margins, is a reminder that there is still racism and discrimination within our country. And, the undertone of believing that, she's only where she is, or she was only chosen because of, this DEI propaganda that's been propped up by the opposition, or promoted by the opposition. But we can't continue to let that weigh us down. Whenever I do hear those comments, or whenever I go into rooms or have conversations with supporters, with funders, with partners who kind of have that same sentiment, as I ask them, who better than her, right? Let's look at her record. Let's look at what she's done for the people. Right now, I can say, as a young person who leads a Gen Z youth center organization, that the Biden-Harris campaign, under the leadership of President Biden, but also with the support of Vice President Harris, has pushed one of the most progressive youth-centered agendas that this country has ever seen. And so who not better than her to lead this country, as young people are becoming a very important voting bloc in this nation, to lead us. And it goes beyond color lines, right? It goes beyond that. It really focuses on justice, and the issues that the people at the margins care about.
I'm so glad you mentioned Kamala, the vice president's agenda that she has advocated for since becoming vice president. And that's one of the issues I think that all of those who are involved in this campaign are going to have to push. What are some of the other issues, Melanie or Gwen, that people need to be mindful of when they think about, whether she is actually qualified, whether she represents the people, not just Black people? What are some of those things, or even if it is just Black people, because we're trying to get Black folks out at the polls, right?
Right,
But,
right.
what are some of those issues that you would suggest that folks need to think about when they look back at her time as vice president of the United States?
I think one of the things that's really important is that you need to take stock on what did happen and what else needs to happen, because they're asking for a second term, not to start from scratch, but start from where they would have left off after 4 years. And so to get folks to understand that this is an opportunity to look and to make sure that you look holistically at the power wheel. And that means that you need the White House, the House, and the Senate. And we need Supreme Court reform. I'm talking from a federal level right now. And so to be able to have the opportunity for folks to say, okay, we got to pay attention to down ballot races in order to move our agenda forward. If we want voting rights reform and the John Lewis Act, Voting Rights Act passed, and the Freedom to Vote Act passed, if we want to codify Roe v. Wade on a legislative level, if we want the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act passed, those kinds of things, those things are unfinished business, is what I call them. Mm-hmm. And so I say that to, especially for Mary Pat, for young people, it's unfinished business. So what else do you want to see happen? And then you got a binary choice to make. Third, I don't buy it, which is stay home. But people will do that if they choose. Mm-hmm. But to look at which candidates are talking about those issues and which candidates are talking about taking us back to not just the 1950s, but taking us back even further by the laws that they want and the policies they want to. You think about the millions of dollars that students in student loan debt that that was a big issue for young people, right? Mm-hmm. You have an administration now that can say this is how many millions of dollars that we were able to do, and we want you to do more. Well, you can't do more if you're not in office. You can't do more if you can't get the money from the Congress. So just being able to, in these times, to be able to say to people, your vote got you this, and here's what else you want. Who's talking about it, right? Who's saying this is on their agenda? And the economic issue is really big, especially, Mary Perry, you agree with me. I know you will, Gwen, and everybody else, that people can't even afford to think about buying a home. That's a big issue. So we got to address affordable housing. People are spending too much of their paychecks just to have somewhere to sleep, right? At the end of the day. So there are those kinds of real bread and butter issues that are impacting us. What I love, and I'll be really quiet, is that hearing brothers talk about Kamala Harris's record as a quote unquote prosecutor. And one of those brothers I heard, as I was peeking in like some of the rest of us last night, was to hear that brother say, "Let me tell you what she did for me." Right.
Right.
Because what's happening is that all that information, people say, well, she's a prosecutor. He's a, and she go, no, but she prosecuting the case, right? And understand that she did things that gave people second chances, and be able to understand that just because you a prosecutor don't mean you the enemy. You want a prosecutor that's going to be fair, to give people a chance. And that's what's important, to be able to help paint that record. And she's going to have to do that, because that's going to be the one thing they're going to continue to try to use as a wedge, that she was this person. And to think that Black people don't need to be safe.
And, so let me. I want to, because I run out of time, and I want to get a couple more questions in. When Joe Biden was running for president, it was Black women who, and of course, the congressman out of South Carolina, who really helped to save that campaign, but also pushed to make sure that there was a Black woman on that ticket.
Yes.
What are you all pushing for right now to fill that vice presidential slot? Is there any candidate that she's looking at, or that you all are looking at, that you think will be as galvanizing as she is in this race?
Denise,
Gwen?
before we even get to that, and I co-signed to everything that Mel said, because that's our policy guru sitting over there. But I want to also underscore, it's not only about what we get from Kamala Harris, it's what we would get if she were not elected. We are basically a breath away from an autocratic, narcissist, so antisocial lunatic running our country. We're talking about this 2025 is only the light side of it. We are talking about our rights being totally erased. And that is something that we can't let happen. Now, I think that Kamala is a superb candidate. She is going to bring so much to the table. We've got to get people out. But I think people need to come out because she is such a wonderful candidate, and because of the history making, but also, what is the alternative? And that's the thing that's very scary for us.
Well, great point. And I think in addition to, I think maybe your response to my last question is, you trust the decision that she will make.
Right.
But the bottom line, based upon what you're saying, Gwen, which I think is why these calls were so important, is how do we get people out to vote? We saw in the primaries, at least here in the District of Columbia, Prince George's County, or in the state of Maryland, even in Virginia, the turnout was dismal, particularly among African Americans, because that's what we look at. And so now the big issue is, and it was really exciting to hear the Divine Nine and all the organizations that are talking about, the barbershop talks and all the things, beauty salon places, all the places folks are going to go. You talked about volunteering, Melanie. And Mary Pat, you work with Gen Zers. What is that GOTV going to look like? And how will we know it when we see it? Because people need to, in communities like mine, if they don't see any activity, they're going to think there's nothing going on. So how do we make that happen to get folks out to exercise that choice if they think they have one? Anybody want to take that?
Mary Pat, you want to go first?
No, I'll let you go first, Ms. Melanie.
I want to hear what you had to say.
I did too, because it's go ahead.
I would say this. You're going to see organizing, which is what we're seeing, and you're going to see organizing that's being done through organizations, but you're going to also see people showing up in unique ways in this. There's no doubt that social media will have a role to play in being able to see more people, which I was loving some of that last night again on the men's call, where they were talking about, and getting the word out about the brothers being targeted for bad information and people having trusted voices. But I think you're going to see some of what we saw in 2008, and that was that people. I got a call from a cousin the other day who's in Georgia, matter of fact, and he was like, "Cousin, hey, listen." After they saw what happened, we run a school where they train folks to work in medical field. I want to take my next class in September and make sure everybody's registered to vote. That's kind of what we're going to start seeing. I want to make sure they're registered. Can you come? As well, I'm in Georgia all the time anyway. Yeah, I'll come. Right. So it's going to take that grassroots on the ground, but it's going to be things that aren't going to just come. Campaign got to do what the campaign has to do. But I'm telling you, what we saw in those two calls is an example of people just jumping up and saying, we're going to get this done. And I think we're going to see a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say to Mary Pat, because, I just, just a few years back, we had Gen Zers and millennials, the whole group, saying, the fact that people died for the vote, Black people died to get the vote, did not motivate them to vote. And so I'm not hearing that right now, but I am wanting to know what is going to motivate your peers and the peers behind you, those 18 and over, or those who are qualified to vote, males and females. What do you think the message is that we need to get out to them?
I think the message is very evident. I think it goes back off of what Mrs. Quinn was saying when it comes to what it is that we have to lose. I think many young people are afraid of living in a society where they've lost rights that they've had their entire lives. They can't fathom living in a society where women don't have basic access to their own bodies. Families who struggle, specifically Black women who struggle in states like Georgia, don't have access to proper health care. Issues such as climate justice and climate change is extremely important to young people. LGBTQIA rights, right? The fact that you're telling someone that, you can just openly discriminate against someone because they're LGBTQ, that taking away their rights as individuals and human beings in this country isn't right. Or the fact that, we could potentially live in a society where they may not be able to love who they want to love. These are things that these are things that are normal for us now. These are our basic human rights, but these are things that we have a risk of losing if, things don't pan out the way many people at the margins wanted to pan out going into the election on November, or coming out of the election on November the 5th. And so those are the things that are motivating them. When we talk to young people in Arizona, their biggest thing is we've got to get out the vote because we've got to protect women's rights. When we're talking to young people in places like Michigan, they're organizing and mobilizing on the ground around climate justice and climate justice and how it's impacting communities of color. When we're talking to young people in Georgia and young people in North Carolina, they're talking about the maternal mortality rate and how it's impacting Black communities, as well as investments in minority serving institutions like HBCUs, and what we have to lose there if we have a different, depending on what happens on November the 5th, right? Like, will we have HBCUs? Will there be a mass divestment in our institutions? Just the unknown, right? With all of the policies that the recent Supreme Court has pushed around diversity, equity, inclusion. And so, those are the issues that we are really centering when it comes to, talking to young people at the polls, but those, talking to young people to get to the polls, but those are also the things that they're saying are motivating them to go and vote and organize their communities.
Yeah.
So glad that you raised those points. Gwen, I do have a question for you before we go, but go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, everyone says this is the most consequential election in history. Guess what? This is the most consequential election in our history. We already saw that the man who was in the White House up until January 2021, tried to stage a coup, a violent coup of the U.S. Capitol, unprecedented. we saw that this criminal, 34 times convicted felon, has basically said, I'm going to get back in control. And guess what? He pretty much told us there's not going to be any more elections after this. So, I mean, if that's not enough to motivate people, we obviously have a good story to tell. We have a Kamala Harris, the achievements, the brilliance, the possibilities. That's there. But if the threat of what would be not Kamala Harris doesn't get people to the polls, I don't know what will.
Well, I don't want to end on this note, so I'm going to ask a question after this. But the one I'm asking right now is, as we are celebrating women across the country, the nation is celebrating, this historic moment. We're also seeing history repeat itself as a 36-year-old Black woman, Sonia Massey, was shot and killed by a police officer, and her alleged weapon was a pot of hot water. This is quite, a horrendous event that has taken place at the same time we're talking about Black women leadership. Any response or reaction that you all have had to this incident? I know it's still, it's under investigation. The officer is, I don't know if he's not on his post anymore, of course. One who's been had 6 jobs in the last, 2-3 years. But anyway, I don't want to talk about him, but this woman, who actually called the police to come because
and
she
had on
thought
her
she had some
pajamas,
intruders.
had on
Yeah.
her
Exactly.
PJs, right?
So first of all, unfortunately, another heartbreaking moment, right?
Yes.
And one that should never have happened. So we got to lift up what that family's got to be going through. And I haven't honestly had a chance to go deep into finding the details, but I know enough to know that the woman, she should never, she's not have been shot. She should not be dead right now. So it's another reminder of that we have to continue to fight to deal with the issue of police reform in this country. We have to, and that this issue won't change until that happens. Piecemeal is not going to get it. From jurisdiction to jurisdiction is not going to get it. It's going to take universally changing these policies that really are policies that are killing our people and allowing officers to feel those who are like that officer. From what all indications of what I've seen so far, and I don't have a lot of information, it's enough to know that it shouldn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I just I'm going to now ask you all to put on your PR marketing campaign hats and give us a theme or a what is it? What would we call it, Glenn? A brand title. I mean, what can we use? What should people use for this campaign when they're out talking to folks? You got to give that like quick win with Kamala or something. What have you all come up with?
You took it. I was actually going to say that.
Yeah.
Win with Kamala, because it's clear across the board. We have to keep it going. As little as people they were trying to push Biden out. Clearly, Joe Biden has been the most effective president in our history for Black folks. And maybe that's why they were trying to get him out. Yeah. But I think win with Kamala. I love it. Denise, you and I, great minds think alike, huh?
Melanie, what do you have?
Well, I don't know how I can top that with Gwen. Yeah, she's a historical and a current guru when it comes to messaging and strategy. I'd also add another one, right? As opposed to take away one. Add another one. I would say all in for Kamala.
Okay. All right. And Mary Pat?
My thing has been I'm with her because she's with us, or we're with her because she's been with us. When I think about the progress that she's made and the things that she's pushed when it comes to student debt relief, when it comes to free college or, students graduating with debt-free college options, when it comes to climate justice, when it comes to voting rights and fair and free elections. And the list goes on. Like, she has been with us, and because of that, we're standing with her. She has an amazing track record. She's done the work. And if she can do the work for us, then for the next 100 and something days, we're going to do the work for her.
Fantastic. So we've got 3 so far. So that's good. We're going to see all those on T-shirts and bumper stickers, I guess, and
we'll
whatever
see them
folks are
blazed
using.
Across the Informer's front page.
Marion Jones, who's been watching and commenting throughout the show, gave us "Rise Up with Harris."
Okay.
So that's another one. In closing, anything else you all want to say that we may have missed that you want folks to take away from this interview? I want to thank you all so much for being with us. But anything else you want to take away?
I think
really quickly, when you asked about the VP, I would say honestly, it doesn't at this point for me, and I know Mary Pat and Mel may have their own. You know what? I don't care. I just want to make sure we elect Kamala Harris, and whoever is the second on that ticket, as long as it's not a Trumper, I am okay, because we cannot do better than what we have at the top of the ticket, and anyone else will be gravy.
Anybody else have anything else you want to weigh in on or respond to, Mary Pat?
No.
Okay.
The only thing I would say is remember, don't just vote for president, vice president. Make sure you give her the power she needs by electing a Congress that reflects those issues as well, the House and the Senate, and look at what's happening in your states. Pay attention to the whole ballot. My phrase is power to ballot, right? And that's where we are, and we got to own that and take it to its full. And let's go ahead and, on a personal level, I'll say this, right? Let's win this thing.
And you know what? Just to tackle into Mel, I run an initiative that is a nonpartisan. I know Mel does too. This is not about partisan. This is about our lives and our futures and the future of this nation and democracy. And it's small d. I'm coming to this as a small d Democrat. And I think that's the bottom line in this.
I want to ask before we go, and thanks for that, Gwen. The one last thing is, if people hear this, or in cities across the country, but particularly here in the DMV, and they want to get involved, is there anything, any place they can call? They can. What's happening? How are they getting volunteers? Anybody want to share the information? Is there a general website, or we should have posted? Well, I don't know if we could have posted that, but
there's no one website. I would say, all they got to do if they want to get involved on the partisan side of this, just find your, local, now Harris, campaign headquarters and do that,
Okay. All right.
But also, you mentioned, like, on my C3 hat I put on, they want to get involved with us, right? They can go to unitycampaign.org. And if they want to get involved at your church, get involved right there in your household, right? Get involved, do something to take this opportunity we have. And Gwen talked about what's at stake, and Mary Pat talked about what's at stake, and it's a real thing, and it's important that everybody do something, right? And that old thing we used to do back in the day, we say, and when you go to vote, take at least 5, arrive with 5. That's an old one. But arrive with 5. Because in some of these states, they're going to try to also suppress that vote. And we have to make sure we're prepared for that by turning out where they can't steal the election.
I got one for you. Take your toes to the polls. All right, y'all. Thank you so very much for being with us today. A lot of work ahead. Certainly looking forward to see what happens at the Democratic National Convention coming up in a couple of weeks. maybe we'll see you there, and we'll keep in touch and try to keep this conversation going. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Thank you. And thank you
Thank you,
all,
everybody.
especially to Mary Pat and Mel, for continuing to lead us into the future. Thank you.
And thank you, Denise,
All
for
right.
having us. This was fun with
Oh,
my favorite sisters,
always.
all y'all. Okay.
All right. Thanks a lot. See you all later.
Bye-bye.